Hi everyone, right, it's time for part 3 of our Ange Insight series. Already on the channel we've spoken to Ryan McGowan from Ange's national side, we've spoken to a friend and rival manager of Ange, Ernie Merrick, but what about an Ange captain, and what about the captain of probably Ange's finest team ever, Brisbane Roar, Matt Smith, potentially the greatest Aussie club side ever? Are you having a bit of that?
That's a big statement, but I think we'll take it. Look, it was. I was just saying to you just previously before that it's a fantastic year for Brisbane Roar, right? I get a lot of questions, which was nearly probably 10 years ago now,
Yeah.
of what it was like inside. Like everyone knows and reads everything about newspapers and journals and everything about certain aspects, but to kind of live and breathe it every single day. I guess it's an insight that I get a lot of questions on. So we had some great memories there.
And we're going to get into all of those wonderful memories with Ange. You were a centre back. You were born in England. You came through Portsmouth's academy before switching to Australia and going on to play for the likes of Gold Coast City, of course, Brisbane Roar, before spells in the likes of Thailand and Hong Kong as well. You also earned 3 Australia caps. You're now football director and player head coach at Brisbane City FC. Would you say that spell at Brisbane Roar was the best of your career, the most fun you had in your career?
Look, I didn't make my pro debut till I was the age of 27, right? So
Yeah.
I went through, I guess back then the Portsmouth Academy, went through all the centre of excellence, and I got let go at 17. Just wasn't good enough as such, and then was like, okay, well, I need to go and get an education. So I done a degree and a master's, and my family immigrated to Australia, and I was very fortunate that I was able to get the opportunity here. It was actually a fellow Scottish great, actually, in Ian Ferguson, that gave me my first team pro debut at North Queensland Fury when he took over with Robbie Fowler there. So I spent just under a year there, and then Ange took me to Brisbane Roar, and it was the first year that we won the grand final in the league and stuff. So it was it was Ian Ferguson. I'm very grateful to, obviously, Rangers. I know that, but he was the one that gave me my first chance. But then it was Ange that really kind of propelled my year. That went my career went very quick. Within the first real season of pro football, we'd done this, and then the Socceroos kind of come knocking. But I was 4 years into an Australian commitment, so I couldn't quite qualify. And then the 2 years with Ange, and there's so much written about that. The 36 games unbeaten streak, Asian Champions League back to back. I guess revolutionising. And I guess it's still being talked about now. Like I said, the identity of how we changed the style of Australian football, because I guess that's part of his messaging all the time was, let's do something that's beyond just what we see in the pitch, right? It was always about the bigger picture. It was always about, okay, well, what's the journey and whereabouts are we going, and I guess why. He had a why to everything, which was so believable, and for the players that were there, he just wrapped them in that, and it was like a snowball that kept rolling and rolling and rolling, right? So so many things I learned as a person, so many things I learned as a player, and it was an opportunity and it's actually shaped how I then spent the next 10 years of my playing career, and obviously now I'm transitioning out of playing into different roles within different levels, but it's certainly opened my mind to a whole different way of looking at football.
I can already tell this is going to be a fascinating chat with you, Matt. You've got loads to say already. What about his start to life in Scotland now? You maybe haven't seen every game Celtic have played. Are there any surprises for you with how well he's done when he's come to Scotland?
There's no surprises now. I think that and I guess following patterns, right? Like Ange joined Brisbane Roar at a point where I guess it was a fresh start. So it was. I remember going into all of our preseason. We didn't win a game. We played Everton in a preseason friendly. We lost that game, but that was the first real occasion. It took like kind of 3 months of kind of building our systems and everything, and then we played Everton. We lost 2-1, but we kind of surprised ourselves. Realistically, like we had a team rather than kind of individuals, and that's Ange's approach, right? He doesn't really focus on individual players. He does within that, but it was all about how the team operates within roles and responsibilities. And we got off to a slow start in the league, and we didn't actually win our first game until round 5. and then we went 35 games, 36 games unbeaten. So when obviously went to Japan and across to Celtic, I guess inside me, I knew that it would probably take a period of time of that little of understanding of direction, right? So, but then once he overcomes that, like, and he blocks out everything. He blocks out everything. Like that playing group will be so invested in each other that they won't hear the noise, they won't hear the media, they won't hear all the external factors because he's so good at blocking that out. And that was one of the biggest strengths with us. So, but there's no surprise now that obviously it's the curve that's why he's so successful. So initially I knew it would take a bit of time, and I done an article, I think, with might have been the Daily Sport, I think maybe 4 or 5, 6 months ago, and I think I was quoted as saying the same thing, like give him time, because some of the questions at that point were like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but he signed like a 1-year deal. And everyone was like, "Oh, it's a 1-year deal. Was he's not going to last?" All this sort of stuff. And I'm like, just wait. Like, give him time, and then you'll see it'll just the curve will just spike.
Yeah, Celtic only offer out 1-year deals really. It's been a 1-year rolling contract since I think Martin O'Neill. And I listened to an interview with Ange recently actually when he spoke about quite enjoying the fact that you don't have security as a manager. It kind of keeps him on edge, and he quite enjoys that feeling. So I don't think that the whole 1-year deal thing, was just people looking for holes in the whole Ange experiment. I think if it comes down to it and he keeps succeeding, he may get what Brendan Rodgers got and get a slightly longer term contract. When did you first come into contact with Ange, and what were your first impressions when you met him?
Just on that being comfortable, he does that with the players too. He never lets anybody get comfortable, whether or not you're a senior captain within a club or whether you're a young person in the crowd. There's an equilibrium across the whole playing group. So, that's a bit about his psyche, and that's what one of his biggest strengths are as players. You never get comfortable because you know that it doesn't matter who you are. You have to continue what his principles and philosophy is. But when I first come across Ange, it was obviously in the off season here in Australia, and I was, long story short, but North Queensland Fury, the pro league club that I was with, I had a 2-year contract, but the owner pulled away, so all our contracts are basically void. So I went back to Gold Coast, which is near Brisbane, and he phoned me from Germany like 2 weeks later, and he was signing probably one of the greatest ever foreign players within this country, in someone called Thomas Broich, and he was visiting Thomas in Germany, and obviously through the club and contacts, obviously he's phoned through, and the conversation probably only lasted 15-20 minutes. But within that 15-20 minutes, there was, I don't even think we negotiated my contract. It was, the words that he said to me about how he wants to kind of build a team that's going to do something special in Australian football, but more so how we want to do it. Because Australian football was, I guess, generally speaking, very competitive, very physical. And typically before that, it was quite transitional, quite long. But his philosophy and approach was, well, why can't Australian players play possession-based football? And at that point, it wasn't really a thing. So he explained how I fitted into that system and what he expected from me, and where he wanted to take the club. And like I said, he sold his vision on a longer-term approach. It wasn't just a matter of coming in, we want you for the season. It was more about selling and his ideals and his beliefs about how football should be played and why it should be played, and where he wants to take this team that we had then and also the club.
It's interesting you say about that first phone call, because the amount of signings Celtic have made this season, when the player has been interviewed and they have said, that one phone call or that one meeting with Ange and I wanted to sign. We signed a player recently from MK Dons, Matt O'Reilly, and he said, in his press conference, I just wanted to come to the club the minute I spoke to him. I think Joe Hart was the same at the start of the year. There's obviously other ones as well. Is there anything that you remember, any words or phrases he said that just stick with you, or was it just the overall kind of messaging?
So I played under Ange for 2 seasons, and one of the biggest things that I remember of Ange is, as a team, we would walk into a video analysis pre-game of opposition, or we'd walk into the dressing room pre-game, and he had his tactical team talks, but there was never any motivational team talk that was ever the same. So if you can imagine a two year spell, and every single team talk would be completely different, and you would walk out of that room and you'd be so fired up. You're ready to go through walls, right? So the boys used to have a little bit of a laugh and jokes like, well, what's he going to say today that's going to inspire us? But he managed to find that something, right? So I guess you could say being engrossed in football is Ange's mentality. Like football is everything for him. So there was many things of his beliefs, his actions, his mentality, his approach, but it was actually his variety of how he communicated that was one of his big strengths from my experiences.
Do you think he practiced in front of the mirror the night before games?
We have to ask his wife, but I'm not too sure.
We heard the same from Ryan McGowan when we interviewed him. He said that once they did a team talk for the Socceroos before lunch, and he literally left the room and wanted to slide tackle a waiter. That's how fired up he was after Ange's team talks. You were a defender, obviously. When you join the club and you hear his way of playing, that he wants to play out from the back, what are you thinking?
Well, being a defender, and we a little bit different here in Australia, right? Like we used to play at Suncorp Stadium, the club played at Suncorp Stadium, the capacity is 52,000. Like I remember when we first played the league games, there was like 6, 7, 8,000. By the end of the season, there was like 25, 30,000. And then the grand finals, there's 50,000. So it's different to you guys when you're playing in front of large numbers every single week. But to play a build-up style of football, I remember one of my first training sessions here, I've received the ball from the left back. I've made this beautiful like 80-yard ping pass. Like it flew in the air, straight on the button. I'm happy with that. And then he didn't like tap me on the shoulder, but he's like, Matt or Smithy, he's like, Smithy, we don't do that here. Like that. And I was like, what? Like I've just passed 80 yards on the button. And he's like, look, we don't play that. We don't play that here. What we're looking you do is build up and play. So, translated that in like a pre-season and stuff. When it comes to the competitiveness, when you're trying to build up and the opposition knows you're building up and the opposition is trying to stop you, and I've got forwards and wingers trying to press me in, the midfielders are pressing in, it's petrifying, right? But it was petrifying until it became normal. So how we train and how we prepared just became the norm. So when it comes to the games, we were so prepared mentally because we trained harder than we actually played, believe it or not. Like the training sessions was so hard and intense every single day that when it comes to the games, you don't think about anything else apart from angles, spaces, movements, rotations. It was more about your teammates more so than yourself. Like if I played out and I made an error, it wasn't necessarily my fault. It was the people moving off me, right? But yeah, playing out under pressure, in the pro game, it was really challenging, but again, very rewarding, and it changed my way of thinking because how many times do you see a central defender open up the body and had probably got an option to play, but then still goes along anyway. So, that was I guess beforehand, and then that was a process of how Ange, not only for myself, but my fellow central defender, my fullbacks, in the fields, like the goalkeeper was under immense pressure to always play like you can imagine. And we would play the ball across the 6-yard line, and the commentators, like when I watch the game back, like, what are they doing? They're playing across the 6-yard line like this. But for us, like that was how we trained. That was how we prepared. So it just became the norm.
I guess if you practice like that, as you say, it just becomes natural to you and not an issue anymore.
Yeah, I mean, again, like obviously with the squad numbers that we had, when we're playing against, say, the squad numbers within training, they know exactly what we're going to do as well. So if you can imagine, like our players are pressing us and they know how we're going to play. So to try and unpick that in training was harder than the games, because in the games there's so many variables at play that all that you need is, and we should say all the time, all you need is one player to be a meter off, and we'll be able to unpick it and find it. And from memory, I spent 5 years at the club, but I think especially during those years, we never, don't quote me here, right? But from memory, I don't think we copped a goal from playing out from the back anywhere. We copped the goals in other areas, sure, but it was never I'm trying to play the ball out and it got intercepted and they went through 1-on-1 or nothing like that. It was, like I said, it kind of just become the norm.
There was one game that I actually wanted to ask you about to do with that. I don't know if you played a 3-0 defeat to Melbourne Victory in September 2010. I think it was like your last defeat before your your long run. I was listening to an interview with Ange, and I think Luke De Vere possibly had a mistake in that game. And again, in the interview, Ange told this story where he was obviously gutted. He was going back to Melbourne, the city that he was from in Australia, with a point to prove as a manager of Brisbane Roar. 3-0 defeat. He was gutted. He's not a good loser, he says. But in the dressing room afterwards, he couldn't have a go at De Vere. He almost had to praise him because he was only doing what Ange had told him to do. He says that was the moment possibly that he realised the Roar team, they had the Roar team, that they were fully behind him, even in defeat that day. Do you have any memories of that game?
Yeah, vividly. Obviously, Lukey was my central defensive partner, and he's actually with me training at my club now, believe it or not.
All right.
So we lost 3-0, and that was very early. Like I said, we didn't win a game. Like from memory, the next game was Sydney FC at home, and the captain at the time then scored. We won 1-0, and it kind of snowballed from there. But I remember going in and then watching even the video analysis of that after the training on the first session back, and he's gone through his in and out and the phases of play and the do's and the don'ts, but there was more, there's more words of encouragement. Okay, well, like we went through that game and there was like minor errors that cost the goals, but everything else in terms of the process, everything with Ange was always about the process. Don't worry about the outcome will come, but worry about the process. And because of the process was right, but we got caught, that was an opportunity for us. And we're like, he was very encouraging, even though we made that. But even though Luke De Vere was, I think he was at fault for two of the goals, maybe in that, trying to do the right thing, right? He's trying to do the right thing. And then after that, I guess the rest is history.
Celtic had a similar result this season. Bayer Leverkusen beat us 4-0 in the Europa League. It wasn't a 4-0 game. We maybe weren't worthy of a draw, but it certainly wasn't a 4-0 game. We conceded some pretty sloppy goals that night. What are the chances that Ange will look back on that game as a potential turning point, much like you did in that 2010 season?
Yeah, I think that, again, I haven't seen every single game with Ange over his reign with Celtic, but I would have a good expectation that he would have been in control of a lot of those games, right? Possession, chances, opportunities. Ange was always about control, like control when you don't have the ball and control when you do have the ball. So and the team, we were so machined into the fact that we hated it when the opposition had it, right? So even against Leverkusen, and I don't know the stats, right? But I would imagine that they would have been in that game regardless, even if they lost 4-1 or 4-0. But again, the reflection back on that in terms of the progress, like Ange's all big picture. It's okay. It's the here and the now and the focus on everything. But where are we going, right? So he would have. I don't know, but I would have expected that Ange would now say, okay, well, that's part of our journey. Part of our journey is where we're going. We're on this trajectory, and he would have encouraged. There's no doubt if there was errors in that, because if players weren't trying to follow or do what he was asking them to do, then they wouldn't be there. Right? That was another thing. Like, we had players within the group that kind of come and went, and if you didn't buy into what he was doing, and there wasn't many. Then obviously, that you didn't last too long. So I'd imagine it would be very similar. So again, it would have been an expected turning point that you're going to have that, right? Playing at the level and coaching at the level that he's at now, it's not always going to be smooth sailing, but there's going to be times where over a longer period of time, you kind of should expect, continual development. And that was his thing. Like he always demanded high standards. He always demanded hard work. And he always demanded that every single day you improve. If you weren't ready for that or you weren't prepared for that, then you didn't really last too long. But the players, like I said, bought into that.
He was asked in the lead up to the game last night about, we'd been playing really well. We beat Rangers 3-0, we beat Motherwell 4-0. And the question from a journalist was, can you maintain this performance, or some sort of phrase that was similar to that? And he very quickly shot it down and he said, no, we're not looking to maintain anything. We're improving. We're keeping going. We get better. we spoke to Ryan McGowan, as I said, and he said that Ange doesn't actually speak to his players much away from matches. Was that the case at Brisbane Roar? What kind of relationship did you have both before and after you became captain?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about continuing that trajectory because um, after the first season, the journalists, opposition coaches, they would come out and say, "Well, we know how Brisbane will play, right? We know how to stop them. We know this is how they do it." And there was to be, the commentators with the nice graphics and trying to stop us and everything like that. And Angie's response to that was, "People can figure it out and they can watch it, but if we keep improving, there's no way they're going to stop it." So again, like he kind of used that with us, which was fantastic for us. It gave us another reason why, right? So people will say, "Yeah, we know how Celtic play, or we know how Brisbane will play at that point." But it's one thing knowing it; it's a very different thing when you're trying to stop it. So I guess that was the mantra. But um, with Ange was he's a personable guy. Like you could have a conversation with Ange, but there was never any. You could see there was never any click. There was never any personal bias. There was never any favorites. Like I said, like he would treat everyone the same. He would always, hold a conversation to a point, and then it was, he kept his distance with the players, which, to be honest, the players respected. I think that that from my experiences, the players felt that was the line, right? And it wasn't through lack of maybe players trying to communicate and have conversations. And there was, I mean, there was there's some very very good times with Brisbane Roar where there's good camaraderie and there's good things in the dressing room or out on the training pitch, and so he was very personable, but there was always a line. There was always a line, and I think I heard something or read something the other day about drawing the score if you sit next to him on a plane or something like that. Like there wasn't anything like that. But he was very personable, good professional relationship, and he kept his boundaries with that. And his coaching staff were the same. All right, so I guess that was the unified approach that the players, because I guess typically within football there's always kind of coaching departments, and then within the coaching departments there's good, bad, or indifferent. There's different relationships with the players and the coaches. But one of the things that was very paramount is you could talk to any of the other coaches at that point, and they would all have a unified response. And that was a power of the group. Like he's a very humble guy, very good family man, beautiful family, and but his coaching department, from my experiences during that point too, were tightened together. So you could go and talk to any coach, and you get the same feedback, the same messaging, the same communications, the same approach, the principles, the style. It wasn't different, if that makes sense.
Do you think he'd be very close with his coaches? Would he chat to them a lot, I take it?
Yeah, like I said, he's very strong with his beliefs, and he's very strong with how he wants to do things. So there's no doubt that those initial meetings at the beginning would be, like I said, he thinks about everything and he sees everything. Even when you don't think he's watching, he's watching. So he's obsessed with football, like I said before, and for the small finer details, I'm sure that he's communicating with his staff and more so supporting them on how, and sharing his beliefs about how he wants football to be played and how he sees it. I couldn't tell you, unfortunately, if his coaching staff, because I'm not too sure on that, but I know that he's actually just employed a former coach of mine in Stuart McLaren in the under-18s team as well.
Yeah.
So I know. Obviously, I played under Stuart here at Brisbane Strikers. So again, that will, I'm sure that he's building his approach and his beliefs within the whole of Celtic, not only within the first team.
And Matt, maybe one day you can join us all at Celtic as a wee coach under Ange. Would love to see that.
Yeah, maybe you can ask Ange for yourself. But yeah, no, look, it's yeah, I'm really pleased, and I mean, I'm English obviously, but I've lived in Australia for a long time, and everybody here is very very thrilled and excited, and is completely supporting Ange in his current challenge and opportunity, and from a personal sense, it's no surprise that he's doing well.
We've not really touched on the fact you were his captain, actually, which I think is an interesting thing just to touch on briefly. What did he want from you? mainly, I'm assuming you had conversations when he made you captain. I think it was actually after Matt Mackay left to go to Rangers, funnily enough.
Yeah, it was. Actually, there wasn't many conversations. Obviously, that was my first full season as a pro football player, right? You can imagine an English lad that spent all his life growing up wanting to be a pro football player. Didn't happen, and then kind of getting a chance going into a team that was new. We were forming. We were doing what we were doing. We had a great captain, Matt Mackay. And then I wasn't even in the leadership group. So Ange put in place a leadership group the first year that we were there. And I wasn't even in that. So I was on the outside group, right? And there was more experienced players within the group. I was 27, 28 at the time. And then I got a phone call from a journalist, one of the journalists here in Brisbane, at 6 o'clock the night before. And he's like, I just had the birth of my son, actually. And so I'm thinking he's phoning for that. Hey, mate, how's it with being a dad? Da, da, da. And he goes, Matt, I hear you're the new captain. I almost spat my coffee out. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not even in the leadership group or anything like that. Like, wasn't privy to any of the inner sanctum stuff, right? And I was like, yeah, good one. Like, kind of put the phone down, and then pretty much didn't even think about it. Walked into training the next day, because we train in the mornings there early because it's hot, and just normal pre-training routine, walk out in the pitch. And like Ange, before training, would very rarely kind of call you for a one-on-one or anything like that. It was like, oh, geez, I'm going to be in trouble here. And so he goes, Smithy, go kind of a quick word. And I mean, there was lots in the media about who's going to replace Matt Mackay as captain, and my name wasn't anywhere. And he goes, Matt, you're now the new captain, like that. Didn't even discuss it. And he said something along, not word for word, but he says something along the lines of, "Are you okay with that?" And I was like, "Absolutely." I said, "I'm not going to let you down like that." And it was like, "Okay, on you go," and that was it, right? And then he brought the group in, and then like it was announced, and at that point, like it was, I guess part of my game was always to lead, but I never envisaged one day replacing Matt Mackay, who was a great captain of the club. So then, and we just won the double. We just gone like grand final plus premiership, the league, which is the first for the club. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to say no, and I was more than prepared to do it. And then I remember him addressing the team and saying, "Well, Smithy's a new captain." And I remember just looking around, and I felt like such like an honor and thrill and all the emotion under the sun. And I was also thinking that there's some unbelievable leaders around me. There was probably 6 or 7 players within that could have quite easily be captain. And I actually felt like, okay, well, that's going to be something that I'm going to have to manage. But also, we also knew that there wasn't necessarily just one captain. Like the way that the dynamic of that group was, I was very lucky that there was 5, 6, 7 very, very good leaders within that we all kind of led the team. But yeah, I was very, very grateful to Ange for giving me the opportunity, and I captained the club until I left.
What do you think he liked about you, Matt?
I don't know. You have to ask him. I guess reflecting back on my own game, I never stop. Like I'm not the most technically gifted player, right? I was never the best player within that group technically. As I was a kid, I was a striker. Pretty much, I spent 10 years as a striker at Portsmouth, 10 years in midfield, and I'd only just started playing centre back like 1 year before I actually got picked up pro. And so I was kind of good at kind of playing out from the back. I was technically right for a defender, but I was never a defender in my career. So you can imagine a midfielder being transformed into a defender, right? So from a technical side, I was okay, but I guess from a personality point of view, I guess it was like continual work ethic and hunger and attitude just to never stop, and to very persistent in terms of what I was trying to achieve. Like I was so determined as a kid to play pro football, and I never got the chance. And when I was 27, I would have died to continue and sustain and prolong me being a pro football player. And I think that was part of the recruitment process. Like that first year, and I don't know if it's spoken about, but that first year there was 11 new signings. Eric Partley, for example, I think he spent some time in the 3rd or 4th division in Scotland. But of the 11 new players that he brought in, every single one of those players had a point to prove, or they were
Yeah.
hungry. They were hungry to prove a point, right? So I was one of the players. Like, I would do anything to get an opportunity, and I'll do anything every single day to be able to prolong that for as long as I can. So there was one occasion where Ange did pull me aside, and I think that we played Adelaide next. I can't remember. It might have been Perth Glory we played the week before. It was in the second season, and he goes, it was the only time Ange ever turned to me, and he said to me, he goes, Matt, your performance last week was not up to your standards. You were playing the easy game, and you weren't brave enough, right? And then that was like the one moment where I was like, maybe I did. I'm sure I did, because obviously he wouldn't even say otherwise. But then that just kind of refocused straight away, and then it just prolonged from there. So it goes back to the whole comfortable thing. Like, you never let anyone get comfortable and drop their standards. So I think maybe that was what maybe you can ask him, but I would like to think that I wasn't the best, but I was probably one of the hardest working players in the team, and kind of led through example. But I guess, leading and communicating and encouraging and driving and all the other things that I guess leaders do. But maybe that was it.
Interesting answer. The point to prove bit is really interesting, because Celtic this season have been the exact same. The signings, the players he's brought in, he clearly likes players who have a real point to prove. I mean, again, Joe Hart's an obvious one, has barely played in recent seasons. We bring him in with a real point to prove. I could go through all of our signings. They all, for whatever reason, Dyson Maeda, the Japanese player, had already failed in Europe. Well, kind of failed in Europe for Maritimo, comes back to Europe, point to prove. Numerous other players like that as well. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, we got a message in from Jeremy Santolin, who's a fan of the channel, also made a documentary about you on YouTube titled Mr. Smith, asking what makes Ange angry. Jeremy says Ange was once filmed by a dressing room camera raging at half-time during a Brisbane Roar match. Apparently Roar had just scored and it was 1-1 at the break. So what makes Ange angry? And does he get angry?
Yeah, he gets angry. He gets angry when you don't follow the principles. He gets angry when you don't... He doesn't care about making mistakes. Like, so if you make mistakes trying to do the right thing, he'll praise you, he'll support you, he'll back you 1,000,000%. But if you start not being brave, if you start not showing, if you're not working hard enough, if you're cheating or you're cutting corners, and I know which game, because he punched the whiteboard when we played away at Perth. I think it was 2-2 at half time, and we scored like pretty much with the last kick of the first half to get it back to 2-2. And I remember walking in thinking to myself, all right, well, we haven't played well, but we've got ourselves back in the game. Like, and again, when you go away, there's big pressure, right? So teams come at you, and I remember him saying at half time he was kind of a bit calm, and then all of a sudden he just erupted at bodies within the change room about, again, not moving, not adjusting, not showing, not being brave enough, hiding behind players, not doing what we were doing week in, week out. And I think that's what kind of makes Ange, so passionate about his beliefs, is that, if you stop doing that, the system breaks down. Whereas all the time that you're doing that, again, it's like a wave. It's a wave that you just kind of keep riding. And we went up. I think we ended up the game 3-3 away. Second half was a little bit better, but yeah, like I said, he's very determined on how he wants his teams to build and play, and his ethics culturally within that group. And look, if you do step outside that, he's there to support you and kind of bring you in and educate. And again, it was all about the why. It was all about the end journey. It was all about where we're going. And that's what kind of brought players in, and that's what brought players to the club. And yeah, he had a very good way of articulating his beliefs.
And just finally, did he praise players as well when you did things well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, like he plays like Luke De is a perfect example. He would praise players when they're trying to do the right thing, but it doesn't quite come off. We would walk into a video analysis room on a Monday morning, and every player would be absolutely petrified of not being called out. But on the flip side, sometimes I would walk in there thinking to myself, I didn't really play well at the weekend. I'm going to get picked up in the 45 minutes or the hour presentation of the past game. And then he would like pick up video. He had a very good way of understanding what players needed. I'm sure it was on purpose, but sometimes I would walk in thinking, I'm going to get targeted here. I'm going to get shown up. And then he would like show some clips of like real praise, and I'd walk out there feeling $1 million, right? So again, he had that very uncanny way of knowing what players need at the right time.
Matt, it's been fascinating, genuinely fascinating chatting to you. I could sit here for hours and hours chatting to you about Ange, but I think you need to get to bed at some stage soon, because it's late where you are. We do appreciate you giving up some of your time to chat to us, and maybe we'll get you on at some stage again when Celtic win a European trophy under Ange.
There's no doubt that he'll get there for sure. So thank you so much for having me. Look, I think very fantastic questions, and hopefully I've given a bit of a different insight to what some people have heard already.